Welcome to In-Silico Trials Real Impact, the In-Silico UK podcast that's revolutionizing the way we think about medical innovation. I'm Professor Alejandro Frangi from the University of Manchester, and I'll be your guide through this fascinating world of in-silico technologies. In each episode, we'll dive into cutting-edge research and groundbreaking news that are shaping the future of medical product development and regulation. From computational modeling to simulated clinical trials, we are exploring how digital approaches are transforming healthcare, making it safer, more efficient, more equitable, and incredibly precise. So, whether you're a researcher, regulator, a member of the public, or a patient representative, or simply curious about the future of medicine, tune in as we unravel the complex world of in-silico methods and their real-world impact. Get ready to discover how computer-simulated trials are leading to very real breakthroughs in patient care. In-Silico Trials, Real Impact, where algorithms and data are saving lives. Let's begin.
Welcome to another deep dive. Today we'll be exploring PBPK modeling.
Oh, yeah.
A really fascinating field that's really making waves in drug development.
Yeah.
It's like having a virtual lab right on your computer.
It is.
You shared some really interesting articles and research on making sure these models are reliable and trustworthy.
Right.
Especially when you're talking to regulatory agencies like the FDA or the EMA.
Absolutely.
And that's, really important because imagine replacing some clinical trials with these computer simulations.
Yeah, that's the goal, right?
Yeah, that's the potential we're diving into today.
It's huge, right? The implications of PBPK.
Yeah.
Or as it's formally known, physiologically based pharmacokinetic modeling.
Okay, so that's a mouthful.
It is.
But so break it down for me. Like, I'm 5. What exactly is PBPK?
So think of it this way. You're building a digital replica of the human body on a computer.
Oh, well.
And this replica considers things like the drug's properties,
Okay.
how the body absorbs and distributes it, and even how it breaks down and leaves the body.
So essentially, you're mapping out the entire life cycle of a drug.
Exactly, the entire journey.
From the moment it enters the body.
From swallow to elimination.
To when it's finally eliminated.
You got it.
So instead of relying solely on traditional lab experiments,
Right.
Researchers can use PBPK to kind of simulate drug behavior in this virtual environment.
Yes. And what's even cooler is that
Yeah.
PBPK can even factor in individual patient differences.
Well, that's interesting.
Because, as you know, people respond to medications differently based on their age,
Their genetics.
their lifestyle even.
Right.
So PBPK allows us to account for this variability,
Mm-hmm.
making the development process more precise and targeted.
Okay, I'm starting to see why this is such a big deal for drug development.
It is.
I bet this helps avoid a lot of the trial and error
Absolutely.
that happens in the lab traditionally.
Definitely. And, one of the biggest advantages is that PBPK can help predict drug interactions.
Before they even happen.
Yeah, before they even happen.
Which could have a huge impact, right?
Huge.
On those long lists of warnings you see in your medication bottles.
Exactly.
PBPK could potentially help shorten those.
It could
Make it easier for people to understand.
manage their medication safely. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
That would be great, wouldn't it?
No more grapefruit juice warnings.
Exactly.
So what else can PBPK do in the drug development process?
Well, it's also revolutionizing how we determine the right dose for different groups of people.
Oh,
Think about children or older adults.
right.
They often process drugs differently than healthy adults.
Of course.
So PBPK can help determine safe and effective doses for these populations
Okay.
and potentially reduce the need for as many clinical trials.
Especially in those groups, right, where it might be more difficult or risky to conduct those trials.
Absolutely. So it's a really powerful tool.
It's like PBPK is a superpower for drug development.
It is a superpower.
As we know, with great power comes great responsibility. I'm guessing the FDA and the EMA, they want to make sure these virtual models are accurate
Oh, yeah,
before they make any decisions about a drug's approval.
for sure.
So what's that process look like to ensure the reliability of these models?
You're exactly right. Those agencies need to be confident in the science behind PBPK. And that's where the concept of qualification comes in.
Yeah.
It's essentially a really rigorous process to make sure that a PBPK platform and the models it produces are truly fit for their intended purpose.
So in my research, I saw these two key terms.
Yeah.
Platform validation
Right.
and platform qualification.
Yes.
Now, I'm a little bit fuzzy on the difference between those two.
Okay, sure.
Can you explain it to me?
Yeah, of course. Let's start with platform validation.
Okay.
This is all about making sure the software itself is sound,
Okay.
like a quality check almost.
Got it.
Does it do what it's supposed to from a technical perspective? Are the mathematical calculations accurate? Is the code solid? It's all about the nuts and bolts of the program itself.
So then platform qualification is more about the bigger picture.
Precisely. It's like looking at the platform's track record.
Okay.
So researchers need to show that it's been successful in predicting real-world outcomes in similar situations in the past.
I see. So it's about building confidence that the model can actually make accurate predictions.
Exactly. And just like, a chef might specialize in a particular type of cuisine.
Right.
PBPK platforms are often qualified for specific use cases.
Oh, wow.
So, for example, a platform might be qualified for predicting drug interactions that involve a specific liver enzyme.
So it's about matching the right tool to the right job.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fascinating to see how much rigor goes into making sure that these models are trustworthy.
It is. And, it's not just about checking boxes for the regulators.
Yeah, right.
This level of quality assurance ultimately benefits everyone.
Of course.
Researchers, drug developers, and especially patients.
Right, because ultimately it leads to safer, more effective medication.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it really feels like we're on the cusp of a revolution in drug development here.
We are.
But I know you mentioned that PBPK, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
So what are some of the challenges that researchers face when they're trying to use it, particularly in this regulatory context with the FDA and the EMA?
Well, one of the biggest hurdles is that PBPK is still a relatively new field.
Okay.
And there's a lot of variability in how models are built and evaluated.
So there's not like a set standard yet.
There isn't a single set of guidelines that everyone follows. No.
So it's kind of like the Wild West of modeling.
In a way, yes. And that can make it challenging for regulators to assess the validity of a PBPK study.
Sure, because they need to understand how the model was built, what assumptions were made, how the results were verified.
Exactly. Transparency is key.
Right. So it sounds like building that trust between the modelers and the regulators is really important.
It is, absolutely.
Are there any other challenges when it comes to using PBPK for regulatory purposes?
Yeah, definitely data availability is a major one. PBPK models require a lot of information about the drug, about the body and how they interact, and sometimes that data simply isn't available.
Especially for newer drugs, I imagine.
Especially for newer drugs or for specific populations where we just haven't done as much research.
So it's almost like a chicken and egg situation.
It is.
You need more data to build better models, but you need better models to help you gather more data.
You got it.
But it sounds like, despite these challenges, there's a growing recognition of the value of PBPK modeling.
Absolutely there is.
Both within the scientific community and among these regulatory agencies.
Yes, and I think that's driving a lot of progress in the field.
Yeah, you can see the momentum building.
Definitely.
It's exciting to think about how far we've come and what the future holds for PBPK.
Absolutely.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, I think it's important to circle back to the practicalities of how these models are built and used. So can you walk us through the steps involved in a typical PBPK study?
Sure.
Like step by step.
Yeah, think of it as a roadmap for your PBPK journey.
Okay, I like it.
So the first and perhaps most crucial step is defining the question you're trying to answer.
Okay, so it all starts with a clear objective.
It does.
What problem are we trying to solve with this model?
Exactly. Are we trying to predict drug interactions or estimate a safe dose for children?
Right.
Or maybe evaluate the long-term effects of a new drug?
So you really have to be crystal clear about what you're using the model for.
You do.
That's essential.
Absolutely. And once we have our research question, then we need to define what's called the context of use.
The context of use.
Yeah, what's the specific application of the model?
Okay.
How will the results be used?
So for example,
Yeah.
are we using PBPK to support a regulatory submission to the FDA?
Exactly.
Or is it more for internal decision-making during drug development?
That's right.
Okay, so you're basically setting the stage for the entire study, making sure everyone's on the same page right from the start.
Exactly. And then we move on to one of the most critical steps, which is assessing the impact and risk of the analysis.
Okay, the impact and risk.
Yeah. What are the potential consequences if the model's predictions are incorrect?
So you're kind of conducting a risk-benefit analysis
We are.
for the modeling itself.
So the modeling itself.
If the stakes are high,
Yeah.
you need to be extra cautious.
You do. And then with the risks in mind
Okay.
and the goals in mind, we start to outline the modeling strategy itself.
Okay.
What data do we need to gather? What assumptions are we making?
Yeah.
What are the key parameters that we need to consider?
So this is where the real nitty-gritty of the PBPK modeling begins.
This is It's like laying out the blueprint for the whole study.
Okay.
And then next, we evaluate the PBPK platform itself.
Right.
Remember those validation and qualification steps we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
We need to make sure the platform we're using is actually fit for purpose.
Right. So you're making sure you have the right tools for the job.
Exactly.
Before you even start building.
Before we even start building. And once we've selected our platform, then we can move on to the model building itself.
Okay.
This involves gathering all the necessary data and inputting it into the platform.
So this is where those data availability challenges could come into play.
Absolutely. Access to high-quality data is crucial at this stage.
Right. And if you don't have the data you need...
Yeah. Then we might have to conduct additional experiments.
Okay.
Or rely on estimations, which can introduce uncertainty into the model.
Right. So it's a very iterative process. It's not just plugging in numbers and getting an answer.
It's not a one and done. It's very iterative.
It's interesting.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important to have a team of experts with diverse skills involved.
Yeah, imagine.
You need pharmacologists, modelers, statisticians, and clinicians all working together.
It's like a whole orchestra of scientific expertise.
It is an orchestra, and just like an orchestra needs a conductor to guide the performance, a strong project leader is essential in PBPK modeling.
To make sure all the pieces come together.
Exactly.
This has been such an insightful overview of the steps involved in a PBPK study.
It's a complex process, but hopefully that gives you a good overview.
Yeah, it's clear that there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Oh, definitely. We've only just scratched the surface.
Well, I'm eager to dive deeper.
Okay.
In the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore some specific examples of how PBPK modeling is being used in drug development.
Sounds good.
And in those regulatory contexts.
I'm ready when you are.
Welcome back. I'm ready to see this PBPK orchestra in action.
Okay.
We talked about all the steps involved in a study.
Yeah.
But can we look at some real-world examples of how it's being used?
Absolutely.
I know my research mentioned a few case studies.
Yeah.
One that really stood out to me involved this liver enzyme called CYP3A4.
Oh, yeah. CYT3A4. That's a big one.
Yeah, it's like the busy traffic intersection in the liver.
It is.
Right. It handles the breakdown of so many drugs that we take.
It's involved in metabolizing a ton of medications.
So if a new drug comes along and it messes with CYP3A4, it can cause some serious problems.
It can, yeah. It could lead to unexpected side effects.
Right. Or make other medications less effective.
Less effective, exactly.
So traditionally, figuring this out involved a lot of clinical trials.
A lot. Testing the new drug with other medications.
A lot of time, a lot of money, and of course, risk for the people participating in those trials.
Right. Inherent risk. Yeah.
So PBPK can help us avoid that.
It can with PBPK. Researchers can create a virtual model of the liver.
Okay.
Including detailed information about CYP3A4 and how it interacts with different drugs.
And then you can simulate how that new drug might affect the metabolism of other medications.
Exactly. All without involving real patients.
What's like a virtual crystal ball.
It is. It is.
For drug interactions. Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's powerful. It allows researchers to explore a wide range of scenarios, drug combinations, in a safe and controlled environment.
Without putting anyone at risk.
Exactly. And identify those potential interactions early on.
Well, it's a total game changer.
It is a game changer.
For drug development.
For sure.
What other case studies really highlight the power of PBPK?
So another one that comes to mind is focused on determining safe and effective doses for children.
Okay.
Specifically, ages 0 to 2 years.
Right. Because as we know, kids process drugs very differently than adults.
Very differently.
And their bodies are constantly changing.
Constantly changing and growing.
So conducting clinical trials in that age group is...
It's tricky.
Yeah, tricky is an understatement, I would say.
It is that there are a lot of ethical considerations.
Yeah.
Logistical difficulties.
It can be very challenging.
It can.
But with PBPK, we can create virtual models of children.
We can?
At different ages.
At different ages, taking into account their body weight, their organ size.
How their enzymes are developing.
Right.
All of that. And then simulate how a drug will behave in these virtual children.
Okay.
Help them estimate the best dose.
Without having to conduct full-scale trials in those tiny humans.
Without putting kids at risk.
So it's like having a virtual playground for pediatric drug development.
It is.
Where you can experiment.
You can.
And learn without putting anyone at risk.
Without putting kids at risk.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's really powerful for making sure that kids get the right medications at the right doses without unnecessary delays or risks.
It's amazing to think about how PBPK can benefit those vulnerable populations.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the most promising areas of the field, I think.
So are there situations where PBPK might not be the best approach?
Of course.
Does it have limitations?
Like any model, PBPK has its limitations.
Yeah, what are some of those?
Well, one of the big ones is that it relies heavily on our existing knowledge of biology and how drugs behave.
Of course.
So if there are gaps in our understanding, those gaps will be reflected in the model's predictions.
Right, garbage in, garbage out, as they say.
Exactly. You can't build a good model with bad data.
So we still need to be cautious. And remember that PBPK, it's a tool, not a magic solution.
It's a powerful tool, but it's not magic.
What other challenges are there?
Well, another challenge is just the complexity of the models themselves.
Okay.
You know, they require specialized software and expertise.
Right. Not every research group has access to that.
Right. They don't. And building and validating a PBPK model can be very time-consuming and resource-intensive.
So it's a specialized field.
It is.
But overall, it sounds like the benefits far outweigh the challenges.
They do.
Especially when you consider the impact on patient safety and drug development efficiency.
Absolutely.
So it really is a game changer.
It is a game changer. And as we learn more about biology, as our computational capabilities continue to improve, I think we'll see even more applications for PBPK.
So exciting. I can't wait to hear more about those future applications.
Okay.
But before we move on,
I
have one more question about the reliability of these models.
Okay.
We talked about how models are qualified.
Yeah.
But what happens if a model's predictions turn out to be wrong?
That's a great question, and it's a really important part of the scientific process. So anytime a model makes an inaccurate prediction, it's an opportunity to learn and improve.
Yeah, you have to go back.
You do.
Examine the model.
Figure out where things went wrong. And refine it accordingly.
So it's not about being right or wrong.
No.
It's about constantly learning and refining your understanding.
It's about continuous improvement. And as we gather more data and improve our models, they become more accurate and more reliable.
That's reassuring to know.
It is.
So this deep dive has really opened my eyes to the possibilities of PBPK.
It's a fascinating field.
I'm eager to hear more about its potential impact on the future of drug development and healthcare.
Well, in the final part of our dive, we'll explore some of those big picture questions.
Okay, let's dive into the future of PBPK.
I'm ready.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've explored what PBPK is, how it works, and we even saw it in action with those real-world examples.
Yeah, some pretty amazing stuff.
But now I want to talk about the future.
Okay, the future of PBPK.
My research hinted at some really big possibilities for PBPK.
Right.
What are your thoughts?
Well, it's a really exciting time to be working in this field.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most promising areas is personalized medicine.
Oh, yeah. We touched on that a little bit earlier.
We did.
But you mentioned this idea of creating a virtual twin of each patient.
Yes.
Okay, now that sounds like science fiction to me.
It might sound futuristic, but it's closer than you think.
Really?
So we're talking about creating a digital representation of a patient that incorporates all of their unique characteristics.
So their genetics, their lifestyle.
Everything, their medical history, the whole picture. Wow.
And then we can use this virtual twin to simulate how they would respond to different medications and treatments.
So no more one-size-fits-all approach to healthcare.
Exactly. We could tailor therapies to individual needs.
That's incredible. And so PBPK is a key part of making this happen.
It is. It allows us to take all of that personalized information and translate it into a model that can predict drug behavior in that specific person.
Wow. So what other big changes do you see PBPK leading to in the future?
Well, I think it also has the potential to dramatically reduce our reliance on animal testing.
Oh, that would be a huge win.
It would be a win for everyone, especially the animals.
Of course, because right now, a lot of animal studies are done to assess drug safety and efficacy.
Right.
But PBPK could change all of that.
It could, by using PBPK to simulate how drugs will behave in humans.
Right.
We can potentially avoid many of those animal studies altogether.
So PBPK could lead to safer, more effective drugs. While also being more humane.
It's a win-win. It's incredible. Are there other areas where you see PBPK making a big impact?
Well, I think it could also revolutionize how we think about long-term drug effects.
Okay.
And environmental exposures.
Because right now, we often only have data on the short-term effects of a drug.
That's right. We don't always know what will happen 10 or 20 years down the road.
And PBPK can help with that.
It can. With PBPK, we can simulate how a drug might accumulate in the body over time.
So we can look into the future.
In a way, yes.
And make more informed decisions.
Exactly. And we can't forget about the potential impact on regulatory science.
Oh, right. We talked about how PBPK is already being used to support regulatory submissions to the FDA, but I imagine his role could expand even further in the future.
Absolutely. As those models become more sophisticated, more reliable regulatory agencies could start to rely on them even more.
So we might even see a shift toward a more simulation-based assessment of new drugs?
We might.
That would be huge.
It would be a major shift, and it could potentially streamline the whole drug approval process.
And maybe even reduce the need for some clinical trials.
Potentially, yes.
It's exciting, but also a little bit daunting.
It is a big change.
So are there any hurdles we need to overcome to really realize this vision of the future?
Well, every new technology comes with challenges.
Of course.
And for PBPK, I think one of the biggest ones is data availability and quality.
Right. We talked about that earlier.
We did. Those models are only as good as the data we feed them.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. So we need to invest in research that generates high quality data.
Okay.
Particularly for underrepresented populations.
Right.
And for those long-term drug effects.
And I imagine the complexity of these models also presents a challenge.
It does. As they become more sophisticated, they also become harder to understand and interpret.
So it's a balancing act. You want them to be realistic,
right?
Capture all the nuances.
Yeah, the complexity of the human body.
But you also need to make sure we can understand the results.
And use them effectively, yes.
So we need better tools.
We do.
Better techniques to help us visualize and interpret those results.
Absolutely. And of course, we always need to be mindful of the ethical considerations.
That's right. Transparency, patient, privacy, responsible use of this technology.
Those are all crucial factors as PBPK becomes more integrated into healthcare.
It's been an incredible journey.
It has.
Learning about PBPK.
I've enjoyed it.
So to our listeners, if you're interested in diving even deeper, I highly recommend checking out the Open Systems Pharmacology community.
It's a great resource.
It's a fantastic resource for learning more about this fascinating field.
It is.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of PBPK modeling.
It's been a pleasure.
It's a field that is full of potential, and we're only just beginning to see its impact on drug development and healthcare.
We're just getting started.
Till next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.